Welcome to another Hollywood Times Live.
Thank you for having me, meeting you. I loved the documentary. It was really interesting and it was put together very well. I loved the graphics, how everything worked together, but the interviewees themselves had such a presence and they knew what they were talking about. They were very engaging and I enjoyed that. And what I wanted to ask the first here is, what made you decide on this topic for your documentary? Because there's so many topics out there, but specific topic, what enticed you to tell James Hemings' story?
So when there are too many coincidences that present themselves, I start to think that maybe it's not just coincidence. In this particular case, I was kind of led to this. There were just strange coincidences and breadcrumbs that led me and Ashbel together. So a friend of mine was out in LA and he was working for a company that was actively looking for stories in books, published materials that could be adapted into films. And he and I worked well together. He sent me a couple of stories to look over, just get my opinion. One of them is a story about Thomas Jefferson's time over in Paris shortly after the Revolutionary War. And this character, this man, this historical figure, James Hemings, is with him. And it details all of the things that these guys went through together, all the things that James Hemings did. He's the unknown culinary founding father of America. He was a big political figure to an extent. His choices had a direct outcome on how our country was formed. And of course, none of us know anything about it because he was the enslaved property of Thomas Jefferson, in addition to his brother-in-law. So, I mean, it's a hot mess of drama. So I gravitated to that story, and my friend and I actually started working on a script. We wanted to put together a film about Hemings in a dramatic way. The problem was we didn't have there were gaps in the history. There's not a lot out there on this guy. What we know about his life is incredible, but once you sit down and put pen to paper, you start to struggle to put it all together. So while this is just sort of happening in the background project I'm working on, I'm on a commercial shoot and I hear one of my crew members talking in the background and I hear the words James Hemings come out of his mouth. And I turn around, I was like, Steve, did you mention James Hemings per se? And he's like, yeah, my friend Chef Ashbel is actually the founder of the James Hemings Society. So I was a bit floored by that because nobody knows who James Hemings is. Very few, anyhow.
Right.
And this gentleman, Esteban Granados, wonderful man and an asset on any production, who I've known for years, is really, really close with one of the world's foremost experts on James Hemings. So I told him how strange that was because I'm working on a Hemings project myself. And he's like, you guys should meet and have coffee. He brokered that, and Ashbel and I, we hit it off from the first meeting because I immediately I knew this guy is connected with James Hemings with his story. The way that Ashbel kind of triangulates, if you will, the history of James Hemings by deducing things that kind of had to have happened, not just based on Jefferson's journal writings, but on many different sources of information, and then putting it in this human context. Hemings kind of just came alive. And furthermore, Chef Ashbel's story is really powerful as well. He is a Hemings descendant in many ways. He's an African-American culinary great who went to Paris at the age of 19, just like Hemings did, found his craft over there, came back here, and it just happened. So we put together a sales tape, essentially, the 3.5-minute little sizzle reel, with the goal of trying to find partnerships. And we would kind of change what it was we were pitching depending on the audience. Was it a documentary, a docuseries, a narrative film? It depended really on who we were talking to. So it wasn't a documentary right out of the gate. And we had all this interest, had really some intimidating Zoom calls and conference calls with potential partners. Everybody was, so interested, and they love Ashbel, and they're so intrigued by this Hemings character, but kept hearing some version of this on every call. Is it food or is it history? Gosh. And so I began to see, from a business point of view, I think that this is going to be hard to navigate. People like this, but they're finding a way, and I understand it.
Right.
Because food is soft subject matter, and history is more hard hitting, more deep, and those things seemingly clash. So we just decided to keep going. It wasn't going to be a full blown documentary right out of the gate, but we did another shoot, and then another one, and then Ashbel thinks that maybe he can connect us with Michael Twitty, who is unbelievable. I don't have enough good things to say about Michael. He's brilliant, brilliant historian, unbelievable culinary thought leader. So it just organically became a documentary, and we were able to do it without that big foundational partnership, sweat equity, and just grinding it out. And when we debuted it at the Roxbury International Film Festival, in Boston, it won Best Feature Documentary, and it was, it was an emotional moment for us, just because, it was this organic, homegrown thing that we did out of passion. I think like a sense of duty, even.
Yeah.
Those coincidences were a bit too much, and it's so strange that James Hemings is not a more commonly known historical figure. He's
right. Well, I feel like, in the words of Chef Ashbel, right? Ashbel. He said, most overlooked revolutionary figure in American history based on racism, and basically culinary racism. And I feel like that's what he was saying, how there wasn't much documents. Either they were lost, destroyed because of his race, or just never created for him. And I thought that was very interesting, because a lot of times as a teacher, you are taught to teach the children specific things out of the history books, but you don't get to see the big picture about the Revolutionary era, because it's only specific things that they think are important. Well, I always say, like, what makes one thing important over the other, and in your eyes, this definitely opens up a humongous subject of who else has been left out of the history books, and why were they left out of the history books. And I question a lot about when his death. It was a very interesting topic when you had that chapter of it in the documentary, and it does question, because I did read up afterwards, and I said, that doesn't make any sense. So that was very heart-wrenching, because it's like, wow, that could have actually happened.
Right? It wouldn't take much to make that happen, or to make it look like something else, especially back then. And So with Thomas Jefferson and James Hemings, as you mentioned earlier from the film, Tanya Hopkins, one of our interviewees, makes the point that it's really odd that none of James Hemings' writings survived. There's a single, kitchen inventory list that has survived. But he was taken to France as the first American trained as a master chef, and he had the best culinary training in the world. And he was running kitchens in France, not just in the U.S., which was fledgling baby nation at that point that didn't have a lot of culture. So James was excellent at what he was doing, and he had to give orders, and he would have had to write. So he was literate, probably would have written a good deal. And it's a bit bizarre that nothing survived, but I think that part of that, and maybe even part of the reason that we don't know who he is as a people right now, is I think that might be an extension of Thomas Jefferson's will, because they had a very charged relationship, I gather. I mean, we can't really know, but Hemings' name is one of the most mentioned names in all of Jefferson's diary writings. He was one of the small crew that he took over of, absolutely must have people when he went over to France. James is the one who cooked the dinner, the compromise dinner of 1790, where DC became the capital of the country, and we assumed the debt from the Revolutionary War. James is in the room for all of that. And him and Jefferson does free him when they returned from Paris, because James could have freed himself. Once he was taken over there, slavery was illegal in Paris. If he had done that, it would have been a crushing blow to the American delegation, because at that time they were darlings of the Enlightenment. Slavery, specifically Thomas Jefferson holding a slave openly in Paris, would have been a bad thing for them and for the nation. And we were very dependent on France at the time and owed them a bunch of money from the Revolutionary War. So James chose to protect Jefferson over there in more ways than one, under the condition that he be freed. And he was freed when they returned. But Jefferson couldn't let that be either. He would then bring James back to Monticello to cook for him. He would eventually invite him to be the first chef at the White House once he won the presidency. But he did not send a formal invitation, as would be customary. And James requested that he get a formal invitation the way that Jefferson would to any white man. Frankly, Jefferson wouldn't do it, which is
that makes
crushing.
me wonder. It makes me wonder, do you think they ever were friends, or did he always see him as beneath him?
I bet you, and this is where I think that this gets complicated, because it's impossible to have a deep resentment of a stranger, right? Even if somebody wrongs me, but I just met them on the street, I don't really know them. There's only so much I can feel negatively towards them, because we don't have that social capital. I think that Hemings and Jefferson probably were friends. And I think they were two alphas who were shoulder to shoulder at times. But whenever Jefferson needed to assert his position, clearly he could. And I think that was his way of maintaining his alpha status. Jefferson was a bit of a passive guy. So I could see him doing things like that just to make sure that he was establishing his place in the hierarchy. So I bet you they did have at times almost like a relationship, like brothers, or like father-son, or like friends, or like enemies. I think all of those dynamics existed with these two men. And I think that's probably why none of his writings exist, and why he was largely erased from history for 200 years. I think there was a lot of intentionality there. I imagine. We don't really know.
Besides just not having enough information, was there other factors that was hard creating this documentary?
Oh yeah. So not having no visuals. So there's no photos of Hemings. Obviously, this is before photography when all of this is taking place. And we never got a big influx of that partnership never happened. So we had to find a way to tell this story without doing grand reenactments, and a lot of things that I think you would intuitively do if you could. So a lot of that I had to put on the shoulders of our interviewees, who are incredible. I don't have enough good
Yeah.
things to say about the folks in this film. They are thought leaders. They just really are smart people who have their finger on the pulse of the culinary past, present, and future, I think, too. So Chef Ashbell,
Yeah.
Tony Tipton Martin, Michael Twitty. It's Jacques Pepin, who is a celebrity chef and has been, you know, at the forefront of the culinary world for many years now. Therese Nelson. They bring it to life. And Chef Ashbell, we kind of walk with him on his journey to sort of visit his past and to make some peace with his own history. And we walk alongside with him and learn the story of Hemings along the way. So yeah, it was I'm very happy that we were blessed with the right people to tell this story, because without those voices it would have been impossible.
Now, what would you like audience to get from the documentary? Like, what do you want them to take away?
I think it is important to be curious. And just like you said a few minutes ago, right? Why are some things in the history books and others not? Every time you're sitting down and having a French fries, macaroni and cheese, a little bit of ice cream, there's a story there. How did that stuff get here? And the answer is James Hemings. It all disseminated from that man's slave kitchen in Charlottesville at the Monticello plantation. And there's so much depth to everything, really. And we only know a slight little fraction of it. So I think it's important to be curious. And I think it's important to tell these stories. So I just hope that people walk away and remember who this guy is, because for him to have done all that he did, he is our culinary founding father, and he's this incredibly important political figure to a certain extent, historically speaking. It feels wrong. It feels insulting to his legacy, to what he did, to not know it. That's I feel like, to honor James Hemings, it is important that we speak of him, and then perhaps he will no longer be the ghost in America's kitchen. It's right there, and somehow we've just walked right by it for 200 years. A lot of people know Sally Hemings, his sister,
Yes.
but James has largely been hidden. So that's actually been one of the most rewarding things about this. We've had some screenings, film festivals and such, and you talk to people, and I can tell sometimes people are really taken by the story. Like it has an emotional impact. And I think especially people who are intrigued by history, specifically Black history, culinary history, American history. If you're a curious person,
Yeah.
you should know about this guy.
The interesting thing is, if he came back today, I think he'd be very upset with our French fries at McDonald's. I think he would be like a Chef Ramsay and come in there full force.
Wouldn't you love to know what like a 1794 French fry would be like?
I'm sure it tastes a whole lot better than what we made it now. you
It
know,
might. What's your favorite French fry?
The favorite French fry, I guess, of any fast food restaurant would probably be Chick-fil-A's, because
That's a
they have
reasonable
the
choice.
waffle fry, and I feel like a little bit more healthier than Burger King's or McDonald's. But yeah, it's definitely not frozen. The frozen ones are even worse.
Right. It is kind of funny how you feel like you're doing something a little bit healthier when you go to Chick-fil-A, right? Not sure if that's true or not, but yeah, I have the same feeling.
You're hoping.
That's right.
Now, with your production company, what other different type of films do you like to dabble in? Like, are you what genre?
So Cornerstone Pictures is largely a commercial. They've been around for 30 years. I came in about 12 years ago, and they let me sort of grow became an in-house director, and started doing this film stuff largely because of this. I had worked in the film world many years ago, went into commercial directing, and the Hemings documentary kind of woke it up. So I am now working on two new documentary projects. And actually, along the way, for years, I've worked with Comcast on a series called Voices of the Civil Rights Movement, which are a series of mini docs, anything from 4 to 10 minute documentary films about people in the civil rights movement who maybe have not been properly documented. Their story has not been told. So in addition to interviewing people, like we did Jesse Jackson and a lot of folks, Al Sharpton, people who you would expect, but a whole lot of folks that you most likely are not familiar with, who were very, very important to their specific region or nationally in the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. So that has always been there since 2013, been working on that project. And I think that was also a gateway into this Hemings space. I don't know, you sort of start to get an eye for stories that are missing. Just spending enough time in that space, it made the Hemings situation a little bit more of a natural transition. So the documentaries I'm working on now are, one is a short, one's a feature documentary. Both the subjects are in New York. One is about one of the most interesting artists you will ever meet. She's absolutely incredible, Nancy Burson, who is actually one of the pioneers of facial aging technology, facial morphing. So if you see a poster or a missing person and it says, this is what they may look like because we haven't seen them in 10 years, she's on that patent. She created that and then went on to be a cutting edge artist who is doing stuff that is kind of mind blowing, and it goes places you wouldn't expect. Anybody who is interested in is a philosophical person, has thoughts on the ideas of determinism. It's a really interesting film, and there's a lot of conversations to be started from it. So we're excited to get that out. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to try to start, hopefully, doing some film festival submissions. It's called It's Not Up to Us, and it's about Nancy Burson, her incredible life and artwork. And I have another one about Nina Karufa, who is a Muslim boxer who wears a hijab. So she is a boxer, a comedian, and a committed Muslim.
Oh, wow.
And she's good at all of it. So she has headlined Caroline. She's done comedy shows all over the country and internationally. And for some reason, a couple of years ago, decided I want to become a professional boxer in her mid-20s, which is not too common, right? Just to decide you're going to do that.
That's interesting, because not many females, I feel like, have the idea of let's be boxers.
Let's be a boxer.
Yes.
If she successfully turns pro, she'll be the first female hijab wearing boxer. So it's an interesting, I didn't know that, but
was she late going into that career, or don't usually start younger, right? Than 20.
Oh
yeah.
Wow. Well, it's incredible. She just had a preliminary amateur fight 2 weeks ago, and she knocked out her opponent. So what's interesting, her story is a story about will. I mean, she looks for hurdles and then she jumps over them. And I has an energy unlike anybody I've ever met. Like, you just kind of know if she points at something, she's gonna get it. So it's really interesting watching that happen. And she also got cast on a reality show. I can't say the name of it yet, but she's going to, I think, be a household name sooner than later. And I was very lucky to meet her when I did, and to get working on this, because it's such an interesting story, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to tell it.
That's wonderful. So what would you like to, or where do you send the viewers to follow up on your stories and what you're working on? What's a good website for them to go to?
So in terms of James Hemings right now, it's available on Amazon Prime, Prime Video. Also just became available on Tubi, Vudu, and Plex. There are so many platforms now.
There is. Yeah.
It's head spinning. And jameshemingsmovie.com is our website there. My personal website, anthonywerhun.com. I have an assortment of my stuff up there: commercial, documentary, photography, and cornerstonepictures.tv is our commercial company, which also the new documentary content in some form or fashion will wind up there, at the very least a trailer. So it's yeah, different. Wear a lot of different hats. Very excited that the documentary film hat has gotten bigger. It's
Yeah, definitely.
It's a space that I really do enjoy.
But I also think it's a very big skill set that it comes naturally to you. You know, like you have the eye for documentaries. So it just looked natural. The editing, how you made it all flow, it looks seamless. So
Thank you very much.
Really loved how you put, when you didn't have, you know, the videos and stuff, how you created to have those videos with the food and the different dishes changing in and out, and you know the line of silverware. All of that is very. It's well, it's like a skill set, but it's more of like, you know, your flair of documentary.
Thank you. Try to find things that visually kind of represent the emotional beat of whatever is being discussed. So if you can't show the thing, got to represent it somehow. And I do think that editing is a big part of the documentary universe, and I certainly appreciate good editing. There's so many good documentaries out there, and we're lucky to live in a time where we can do this. You can go watch a documentary and legitimately learn something that would have taken. It's incredible what you can actually consume over the course of a week just watching a documentary here or there. There's so much good content out there, and yeah, I just hope that anybody has watched our film and then went and told that story to somebody else. That's humbling. The fact that Chef Ashbel and I, you know, that's all we set out to do, was just to create something that was easy to find, that was approachable, that wasn't a big, thick history book that you had to, you know, because there's some very, very brilliant historians who have done detailed histories of Jefferson's universe, right? Mm-hmm. And all of his slaves, and of course that includes the Hemings family. But I don't know how many people are going to seek that out. It's great to have, and God bless people who do. But I love that now people can stumble upon a documentary, click a button, and take this stuff in, and hopefully give some justice a couple hundred years later by properly crediting our culinary founding father.
Yes. Basically learning from our mistakes. You know, that's basically what we have to do. We have to put it out there. You know, people have been forgotten, and we can't forget people.
You're right about that. Sometimes we like to avoid the difficult conversations, but if we don't look back at our mistakes, we're going to repeat them. There's no doubt about it.
True. That's what they say. History keeps repeating itself. If you don't learn it first, you're going to learn it again.
Yes, indeed. It's quite the cycle.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for being here with Hollywood Times. This was fabulous. And we'll definitely,
thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And we're definitely going to connect everybody to those websites. So just check in the bottom link, and then we'll put it all there for you, so you guys can check it out for yourselves.
Thank you for watching, and suggest you subscribe to this channel for the next Hollywood Times Live.